Did you grow up the emotional caretaker of one of your parents? And maybe you still play that emotional caretaker in many of your relationships now. You might struggle with boundaries. You might struggle with validating your own feelings and needs. So, I want to talk about the link between emotional parentification, which I'll explain in a second, and enmeshment, as I think that understanding this link can really help you understand yourself and help with your healing. So, the link between enmeshment and parentification actually goes way beyond a link because parentification is actually a direct pathway to enmeshment. By its very nature, parentification creates emotional enmeshment. So, parentification is basically a matter of role reversal where the child takes on the role of the parent. And there's both emotional parentification and instrumental. So, emotional is where the child takes care of the parent's emotions. And I'm going to give some examples in a second. And instrumental is where the child takes on some of the instrumental roles of a parent, such as cleaning the house, paying bills, making meals, taking care of siblings. But there's always an element of emotional parentification within instrumental. The child is still doing this to take care of the overall emotional realm of the family. So, examples of emotional parentification include soothing a parent who's just gone through a breakup, calming down a parent who's getting angry, really trying to calm that parent down to protect the other siblings, to protect the atmosphere of the household, being a parent's confidant about adult problems that are really beyond the child's age of understanding or appropriateness. And ideally, a parent takes care of a child's emotions, right? So, with a good enough parent, the parent helps the child learn emotional regulation. But a lot of parents don't have emotional regulation themselves. And a lot of parents might look to their children to help them emotionally regulate. So another example would be a kid who's getting upset, and the mom is like, "You can't get upset now. Don't you throw a fit. I'm too stressed out. You have to behave yourself so that I can function." And while that's totally understandable in some situations, on a repeated basis, it basically teaches the child to suppress any of their own disappointment, sadness, rage to take care of the parent. So I just put out a video with a definition of what enmeshment is and more information on enmeshment. So I will link that here. But basically, enmeshment is where the boundaries in a family are unclear, sometimes fused, sometimes focused on one or two family members. So, sort of everybody basically caretakes for those people's emotions and suppress their own. Or maybe sometimes everybody's in each other's business. So, an enmeshed family system tends to have rigid roles which don't allow people to individuate and sort of like become their own person. But the role is in service to a family system. Deviations from that role are frowned upon at best, and sometimes they cause major disruption in the family. Usually, there's a high degree of loyalty required within the family system, and generally, there are one or two emotional caretakers within that family system who are helping to try to manage everybody else's emotions. And it's often the empathetic child in the family who ends up taking that role. And these roles are assumed so young, they get deeply ingrained. And they're also ingrained with a feeling of this is needed for my very survival. So, the example of a depressed parent who withdraws from the family system, leaving the kids by themselves, and let's say they're at an age where they can't cook, they can't really prepare food for themselves. They need that parent for survival. And the emotional caretaker of that grouping will do their best to try to pull that parent out of the depression, manage that parent's emotions to help that parent function, or they will step into that role before it's age appropriate in order to help that parent. So they're taking care of the depressed parent's need to be in bed by taking over everything else. So sometimes parentification is very explicit. The parent saying, you can't get that upset because I'm stressed out. Or right now you have to put a lid on it and take care of that kid over there. So that would be explicit. But the example of the parent withdrawing because of depression is where the child is filling a void. So parentification happens in both of those situations. And just a bit of an aside here about why parentification occurs, because different family systems might have different reasons for it. And really, main message here, no matter why parentification happened in your family, the result on you is probably very similar, and the steps to take to heal will be very similar. So some people feel that parentification happened in their family for a reason that wasn't the fault of the parent. So, for example, a parent with mental illness or a parent who has to work 3 jobs to keep a roof over everybody, over the family and feed everyone in the family. The parent may not have another choice. So the parentified child steps in and helps out and gains some valuable skills in that process, I'm sure, but also is suppressing parts of themselves, suppressing the childlike part of themselves, suppressing the desire to play, suppressing lots of emotions in service to the family. So I'm not criticizing that at all. I'm simply saying that when that child grows up, there's a risk that some of these patterns might repeat, and it could easily have the same impact as a situation where the child might blame the parent more, where the parent has an addiction or personality disorder, narcissism, borderline, one of the other personality disorders. And it also might just be a situation where the parent does not have their own emotional regulation because the lack of emotional regulation has now been passed down generation after generation after generation. So none of this is meant to blame the parent or the caregiver. Even in those situations where the parent's behavior really was despicable, a period of anger, a period of processing that might be helpful, but long term, staying in a position of blaming the parent will not help your own healing. So no matter what the reason for the parentification, some of the consequences it might have on you when you're an adult could be the same, and the path to healing is the same. Okay, I want to move on. So having talked about those examples and the definitions, I think it's pretty obvious why parentification causes enmeshment, but I just want to illuminate a handful of the reasons. But basically, boundaries are dissolved, right? When there's parentification, the boundaries do not fit the age appropriate roles. And the child who's the emotional caretaker grows up more focused on other people's emotions, suppresses their own, feels like it's their responsibility to manage the emotions of others. So that's a clear emotional boundary dissolution, a clear example of not knowing kind of like where I end and where the other person begins. So another piece of this is that children in this situation grow up feeling that they are safe when everyone else is okay. So it's almost a feeling of like, I'm not safe unless everybody else's emotions are in a reasonable range. And that might be very true when you're young, but that feeling stays with you as you get older when it may no longer apply. So the other thing that happens with a situation like that is that the empathetic child becomes overly empathetic. It's really a survival need to be able to pick up on all the emotions in the room, pick up on all the subtle changes in emotions, because the quicker you can intervene, the quicker you can manage their emotions. So that feeling of needing to be hyper vigilant about what other people are feeling is very common. So these survival mechanisms become patterns in adulthood. That's what we want to look to change. We want to acknowledge that these were survival mechanisms that worked because you survived, but the same mechanisms are no longer needed today. Okay, the other reason that parentification creates enmeshment is that the parentified child can't individuate. They can't really fully figure out who they are because they're too focused on taking care of others. So without individuation, you have enmeshment. You have blurred boundaries. You probably also have a lot of guilt of being pulled in different directions. Do I take care of my needs? Do I take care of their needs? I don't even know what my needs are. I don't even know what I'm feeling. So that's a direct impact from parentification. And this fusion of self to what the family needs is not cured by cutoff. So I talk in my other enmeshment videos about how cutoff is part of the enmeshed family system. Really healing means at the end of the day, cutoff probably not needed. Now, I know, again, very complicated topic. A lot of people have very strong opinions, and I'm not judging whether cutoff is required or not, because in some situations, it definitely might be. But overall, to think about the healing as being really focused on knowing who you are, where you end, and somebody else begins, and being able to hold to that and navigate many situations with that sense that it's okay to be you, okay to have needs, okay to self actualize. So, parentification also creates negative core beliefs in the children who are parentified. Very common negative core belief could be my needs don't really matter. Other people's needs are more important. It could also be the one I mentioned earlier. I'm in danger if people aren't calm around me. And these negative core beliefs, because they get embedded with a survival focus at a time where they were a survival mechanism. They were needed as a survival mechanism. That gets very deeply embedded in the old brain, the limbic system. And rewiring those parts of the brain can be done. It does take a lot of time and effort. But really beginning to validate your own needs and validate your own emotions. It's okay that I'm feeling this. Taking time to explore what it is you're feeling, to understand your own emotions. That type of work can be very deeply healing in the long run. And then healing from these negative core beliefs. So understanding that feeling of I'm in danger if others are upset. In most situations as an adult, you're not actually in physical danger, which you might have been as a child, but you're not now, and really helping the brain differentiate between the feelings it has embedded from back then and the feelings you can have now if you separate. This takes work. I'm not saying it doesn't take work, but that can be super helpful. So, healing these negative core beliefs, and in case you don't have my free PDF on transform your negative core beliefs, I'm going to show a picture of it here, put the link on the screen, QR code, link in the description. Super helpful. I hear from a lot of people. It helps them identify their negative core belief, and it provides you 3 methods to strengthen a positive core belief that counters the negative core belief. So, definitely worth taking a look at. And the real impact of the enmeshment and the ingrained negative core beliefs is that they follow you throughout your life until you've done the healing work. So you might end up in adult relationships where you're the caregiver. You might choose partners who need fixing. You might choose partners who want the emotional focus on them, not on you. You might bring these patterns into your workplace, friendships, and then they're intergenerational. And likely they lead to a lot of exhaustion because you're trying to do way too much. And they probably also lead to a lot of anxiety because what you're trying to do is actually impossible because we can't manage other people's emotions. We can influence them. And you might have examples of like, oh, yes, I do manage them, but not really. At the end of the day, long term, we cannot fix somebody else's depression, fix somebody else's addiction issue, manage somebody else's rage. So, trying to do the impossible and focusing on it with urgency is a key component of anxiety. Okay, so healing. 1, self compassion. Understand that your patterns came from survival, not from choice. Grieving, sometimes when you really realize how much you've sacrificed for these patterns, there's a period of grieving that's needed. Number 3 is learning to reparent yourself. So, bringing some of those good enough parent qualities into your relationship with yourself instead of being hypercritical of whatever. If you don't hold to a boundary, or you're not kind enough, or you don't do enough, or whatever you're criticizing yourself for, to bring in the good enough parent who can help you validate the emotion you're having, use encouraging words towards yourself. I know it might sound somewhat ridiculous, but really, we all talk to ourselves, and how we talk to ourselves can really impact our happiness. So, bringing in the good enough parent voice for yourself as a matter of reparenting. Boundary practice, learning boundaries. I have a bunch of videos. I have a course. Very, very helpful, because my boundary course goes into overcoming the negative core beliefs that are getting in your way and really strengthening the emotional regulation that can get in the way of having healthy boundaries. But no matter what, not just learning the information around boundaries, but actually practicing them with a sense of emotional regulation is what's going to help rewire the old part of your brain. Building a support system and practicing receiving care from others, super important. And if you have a handful of people that you can trust to provide you with care, being part of those experiences, again, is what's going to change this. This part of our brain changes based on experience and behavior, not necessarily what we tell ourselves. So, actually implementing in real life some changes in your boundaries, some accepting of support is what's going to help. Healing those negative core beliefs definitely needs to be on the list. I talked about that earlier. And then creating space for your own emotional experience. Take some time to delve into what emotions are you having? What are you feeling right now? If you're confused about whether you need to help someone or not, what feeling comes up for you around that? What do you anticipate they're feeling? But look into what you're feeling and validate it. And that does require some space and time. And now I want to share two other things here. If you grew up parentified, you developed a lot of really positive skills. So this whole healing approach is a both and approach. This is about keeping your healthy skills and developing some self-care boundaries, keeping the skills you've developed and allowing yourself to play, allowing yourself downtime, time to focus on joy. And the last thought I want to leave you with, your skills are gifts. They're gifts, but not obligations. Your empathetic skills, your ability to notice if somebody is down and cheer them up, this is a wonderful gift, but it's not an obligation. All right. Could you let me know if this was helpful for you or not? If you liked it, and you can give the video a like, it's a big help for me. Subscribe to my channel if you're not subscribed. Look for some of my other videos on the topics of enmeshment and parentification. I hope this is super helpful for you, and I'll see you next week.